It was a humid June evening when my dad tossed my brother the keys to a brand new Jeep Grand Cherokee and said, "You've earned this, champ." My name's Austin. I'm 22, and I was standing 5 feet away, holding a plastic bag full of leftover party decorations and a crumpled receipt for folding chairs I'd rented on my own dime. I didn't expect a car. I'm not entitled. But the handshake I got felt more like a warning than a gesture of pride. Like he was saying, "Don't make this about you." And the envelope he slipped me? It wasn't a gift card or a letter of appreciation. It was a neatly printed invoice for half the graduation celebration costs, for $173.88. No signature, no note, just a number. Now, I know how Reddit works. You're probably thinking I'm the golden child who finally got dethroned, or maybe that I'm bitter because my younger brother got a better deal. But here's the thing. I'm the oldest. I've always been the one keeping the peace, doing what's expected, never rocking the boat. I didn't storm out of the party. I didn't even flinch. I helped Mom pack up the coolers. I took down the stupid "You did it" banner we'd bought off Amazon, and I even gave my brother a pat on the back before I left. He smiled at me like he'd just won something, like this was a competition and he was finally catching up. Truth is, he passed high school by the skin of his teeth, and they threw him a full-blown backyard extravaganza with catered food and a rental tent. When I graduated 2 years ago, with honors, I got a frozen lasagna and a Facebook post. Growing up, there was always this unspoken rule in my house. Don't ask. Don't need. Don't expect. My parents weren't cruel. Exactly. Just calculated. If you wanted something, you had to prove you needed it. But even then, it usually ended with a lesson about working hard and building character. I got my first job at 15 bagging groceries and used the money to buy my own school clothes. My brother Jake? He broke his iPhone and had a new one within a week. My mom said, "Well, he needs it for school." I said nothing, like always. The real kicker is, I helped pay for Jake's graduation party. They didn't ask, not directly. It was more like Dad dropping subtle hints about how tight things have been and how it'd mean a lot if I could pitch in. I Venmo'd Mom $250 a few weeks before the party. 2 days later, I bought ice and tablecloths and set up the chairs in the backyard. When it rained the morning of, I helped Dad lug the whole setup under the carport. He didn't say thanks. He just nodded and said, "We'll make it work." I kept brushing it off. It's just money, right? It's just one day. But the thing is, it never was just one day. It was a pattern, a slow erosion of fairness that I'd swallowed for years because I didn't want to be difficult. I figured maybe I was imagining things, that maybe I was just more sensitive than Jake. Maybe I was too quiet, too passive, not the kind of kid that demanded attention. But when I saw that Jeep, shiny, spotless, with a giant red bow like something out of a car commercial, I felt something in my chest tighten. Not jealousy, not even anger, just confirmation. This wasn't an oversight. It was a choice. Jake didn't look shocked when he got the car. He acted like he knew, like they'd all been keeping the secret from me. I stood there watching them, Dad clapping him on the shoulder, Mom taking pictures, Jake grinning like he was in a music video. And for the first time, I didn't feel like part of the family. I felt like a guest, an unwanted one. Later that night, after everyone left and I was gathering up the trash, my dad pulled me aside. He had this serious look on his face, like he was about to tell me something important. I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd acknowledge everything. Maybe he'd say, "Hey, I know this doesn't feel fair. I appreciate everything you've done." But instead, he handed me that envelope with the invoice and said, "You're an adult now. You understand how this works." I didn't argue. I didn't even open it until I got back to my apartment. I sat on the edge of my bed, stared at the number, and just felt numb. Not surprised. Not hurt. Just done. 3 days later, I transferred the remaining balance of my savings to cover the bill. I didn't call. I didn't visit. I didn't send a message explaining myself. I just vanished. A month passed before I heard from them. Then the text started. First from Mom. "Hey honey, hope you're okay. Haven't seen you in a while." Then from Dad. "Give us a call. There's some stuff we need to figure out." I ignored them both. Then Jake sent me a picture. It was a screenshot of the electric bill, circled in red. "Why is this so high?" he wrote. And that's when I remembered. The gas, electric, water, even the Wi-Fi, all of it was under my name. I'd set it all up when I moved back after college and was helping them while Jake finished school. They never bothered to switch it over. I never reminded them. That was just the beginning. When the text from Jake came through, I just stared at it, letting the screen dim and fade before flipping my phone upside down on the kitchen counter. I didn't reply, didn't feel the need to. Let them sweat. I wasn't angry, not in the way people usually mean it. I wasn't yelling, I wasn't pacing, I wasn't smashing things. I was calm, cold almost. Like the version of me they'd ignored for so long had finally gone quiet. Not because I'd forgiven, but because I'd learned. The electric bill wasn't even the highest one. I knew it was going to get worse. The gas and water were on a cycle delay, so they hadn't seen those yet. I could have warned them. I could have helped them set up the transfer. I could have walked Jake through the online portals, showed Dad where the breaker box was so he'd stop tripping it every time he ran the air fryer and the microwave at the same time. But I didn't. I let the silence speak for me. See, when I moved back home after college, it wasn't supposed to be permanent. It was one of those transitional, just for a few months deals. I was working part-time at a community center, saving up to move out with a buddy who bailed last minute. My parents made it sound like they were doing me a favor, but the moment I unpacked my bags, I realized I was more of a tenant than a son. They even gave me a list of shared responsibilities, which basically meant I paid for all the utilities and did half the chores. Jake? He had one job, don't flunk out. And even that was negotiable. For a while, I tolerated it, told myself it was just how things were. But now, standing on the other side of that unspoken line, it all looked different. And now that I was gone, really gone, they noticed. The lights still came on, the water still ran, the Wi-Fi was still strong. But the bills weren't being paid, and I wasn't answering. The second call came 2 days after Jake's text. This time it was Mom. I let it ring. Then she left a voicemail, her voice tight, like she was trying to sound sweet, but couldn't quite keep the edge out of it. Austin, I don't know what's going on, but I really think we need to talk. Your father's been getting notices from the utility company, and we're not sure what the issue is. Please, just call us. Let's work this out. Work what out? You mean the part where I funded your party, cleaned up your mess, and got a bill for my trouble? I wish I could say that was the end of it. But it wasn't. That was just the start of the unraveling. About a week later, I went to get my oil changed and found out my bank account had been overdrawn. I logged in and saw a $172 auto payment from the family's old internet provider. My name was still on it. They hadn't even tried to switch it over. So I did what I probably should have done the day I left. I went full scorched earth. I canceled everything. Electric, gas, water, internet, even the trash pickup. And here's the thing. I didn't warn them. I didn't text. I didn't call. I just clicked cancel and let the storm roll in. It hit fast. That weekend, I went hiking with some friends. No service, no signal. I didn't even check my phone until I got back. When I turned it on, it lit up like Times Square. 27 missed calls, mostly from Mom and Dad. Jake had left 2 voicemails and sent me a string of increasingly unhinged texts. Dude, WTF, why is the power off? You know Mom and Dad are freaking out, right? I had friends over, and we had to play cards like it's 1900. Real funny, man. Turn it back on. Seriously, I didn't respond. Instead, I made a cup of coffee and sat on my tiny apartment balcony watching the sun set behind the strip mall across the street. I could practically hear Jake stomping around the house in the dark, shouting at Alexa, and forgetting she doesn't work when there's no Wi-Fi. My mom lighting candles like they were prepping for a hurricane. My dad fumbling with the breaker panel while blaming the electric company. It should have felt petty, but it didn't. It felt necessary. That night, I finally listened to one of the voicemails from Dad. His voice was clipped and angry, like he couldn't decide if he wanted to guilt me or threaten me. Austin, this has gone too far. You're acting like a child. You want to prove a point? Fine. But you don't get to just walk away from your responsibilities and leave your family in the dark, literally. Grow up. Grow up. That one stuck with me. They never seemed to mind when I was grown up enough to pay bills, fix things, tutor Jake through math he never studied for, or haul groceries up 3 flights of stairs because Mom forgot we didn't have an elevator. But the moment I stopped, suddenly I was a child again. A few days passed. I still didn't reply. Then came the betrayal. It was a Thursday afternoon. I was at work when my phone buzzed with a call from my old landlord, the one who owned the house my parents were renting. I hadn't spoken to him in over a year. I let it go to voicemail, then checked it later in the break room. Hey Austin, sorry to bother you at work, but I've got a bit of a situation here. Your folks are saying there was some kind of billing mix-up, and they gave me your name and number for the utilities. I just need to confirm that you've been handling that, and whether you'll be continuing to do so. Give me a ring when you get a chance. They gave him my number. They brought me into it. Again, I called him back that night and explained, calmly, politely, that I had moved out over a month ago and had nothing to do with the house anymore. He was quiet for a moment, then sighed and said, "Okay, thanks for letting me know. That explains a few things." I hung up, then sat at my kitchen table for a long time, just staring at my hands. That was the moment it clicked. This wasn't just about bills or favoritism or even the car. It was about control, about never letting me fully leave. Because if I was still the responsible one, still the provider, still the good son, then they could pretend things hadn't changed. They could ignore how uneven it had always been. But now that I'd stepped out of that role, they were flailing. I didn't hear from them for 2 weeks after that. Total radio silence. Then, on the third Sunday, Mom showed up at my apartment, unannounced. I opened the door and saw her standing there with a Tupperware container and that overly bright smile she always used when she wanted something. "Hi, honey. I brought your favorite. Lasagna." Of course it was lasagna. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "Is everything okay?" She hesitated, then gave a weak little laugh. "Well, not exactly. We've been having a bit of trouble since you left. I think maybe we didn't realize how much you were doing." "You didn't realize?" "No, you just didn't care. Until it cost you." She pushed the container into my hands and looked past me like she expected to be invited in. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside but didn't say anything. She walked in, looked around like she was appraising the place, then sat down at my kitchen table like she'd done it 100 times. I stayed standing. She cleared her throat. "Your father's been under a lot of stress. The landlord's threatening to raise the rent, and Jake, well, he's not handling things very well. We could really use your help getting everything sorted out." Sorted out, like I was a missing puzzle piece in their broken picture. I set the Tupperware on the counter without opening it. "You gave the landlord my number." She flinched, barely, then smiled again. "We just thought maybe you could explain things better. You've always been so good at that. Good at cleaning up your messes, you mean." I didn't say it, but I think she saw it in my face. "Austin," her voice softened. "You're part of this family. We're supposed to help each other." That's when I finally spoke. "I was part of the family when I helped throw the party, when I cleaned, when I paid your bills. But the moment I needed even a sliver of recognition, I got a handshake and an invoice." She didn't deny it. She didn't apologize. She just blinked at me like she didn't understand what I was saying, like she hadn't already lost me and didn't even know it. She stood after that, slowly, her shoulders sagging just enough for me to see the cracks in her performance. "Just think about it, okay? We're all struggling." I didn't answer. She left without another word. The lasagna stayed on the counter for 2 days before I finally threw it away. And just when I thought it couldn't go any lower, just when I thought I had seen the worst they could do, I found out what they did next. That's where things took a turn. After my mom left that day, something shifted in me. Not dramatically. There was no grand speech, no cinematic swell of music as I turned some metaphorical corner. It was quieter than that, like the sound of something finally settling after years of being jammed out of place. I didn't cry. I didn't punch a wall. I didn't even eat the lasagna. I just stood in my tiny kitchen, watching the Tupperware fog up on the counter like it was holding some buried symbol of everything I'd left behind. I'd spent years trying to be useful enough to be noticed, quiet enough to not be a burden, good enough to earn something. Recognition, gratitude, maybe just a little respect. Instead, I got a casserole and a plea to come back. But I wasn't going back. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. Still, it wasn't like I magically had everything figured out. That's not how hitting rock bottom works. Nobody tells you this, but when you finally stop being someone's emotional doormat, it doesn't feel empowering at first. It feels lonely. And for me, it also felt broke. When I'd walked away from my family, I walked away from everything I'd built while living under their roof. No utilities in my name meant no paper trail. And without a consistent address during college, I'd somehow managed to have less proof of stability than Jake, who had never worked a day in his life. It also turned out that moving out with no plan and no backup was way more expensive than I'd expected. My new place was a glorified shoebox. The walls were thin, the heater clicked like a Geiger counter, and the water pressure in the shower felt like being exhaled on by an asthmatic ghost. I had a futon mattress on the floor and a borrowed coffee table with one leg shorter than the others. My bank balance hovered near zero. Some nights I ate peanut butter on crackers and called it dinner. Others, I skipped meals entirely and told myself I wasn't that hungry. But for all the stress, for all the exhaustion, I felt free. Miserable, sure, but free. There's something oddly peaceful about being left with nothing. It forces you to take stock. You stop chasing approval because there's no one left to impress. You stop performing because the audience is gone. And for the first time in my life, I had space to figure out who I was without the weight of being the responsible one. Still, I won't lie. The first few weeks were brutal. I kept expecting a text that never came. Not an apology. I didn't even hope for that anymore. But just some sign that they saw me, that they realized what they'd done. Instead, the silence stretched out like a rubber band, and I started bracing for when it might snap. Work wasn't helping much. I was still at the community center, putting in hours that barely paid minimum wage, trying to stretch every dollar like it was elastic. I was tired all the time. My days blurred together. Wake up, eat something cheap, bus to work, smile through tasks, bus home, crash. But even in the middle of all that, something started to shift. It started small. One night, after closing up the center, my supervisor pulled me aside. Her name was Carla, mid-50s, sharp eyes, no-nonsense kind of woman who always wore sneakers with bright orange laces. She'd always been kind, but distant. That night, though, she sat me down and said, "You've been running the teen program better than the last 3 people who tried. You ever think about going full-time?" I blinked at her. "I can't really afford to." She snorted. "I'm in as a career, not for the money." And that was it. Just one offhand comment. But it stuck with me. A few days later, one of the teens in the after-school chess club gave me a crumpled drawing of the two of us playing together. He'd written "Best Coach" in the corner, complete with backward letters and a big, toothy smile. I taped it to the wall in my apartment, right above the heater. I started noticing things, like how I felt more like myself around the kids than I ever had around my own family. Like how I wasn't anxious all the time when I was on my own, even if I was hungry. Like how, even in my worst moments, I was finally building something for me, not for someone else's approval. So I leaned into it. I picked up a second job on weekends tutoring middle schoolers in math. I started reading books on youth development and behavioral psychology. I applied for a small grant from the city to expand the center's teen program, and we got it. Carla told me I had the kind of brain that doesn't know how to give up. I'd never heard that before, not from anyone. And slowly, I started to rebuild. I got a real mattress. Bought it secondhand off a college kid who was moving out. Then a desk. Then a tiny bookshelf I found at a garage sale. My apartment still looked like a Craigslist special, but it was mine. Every creaky floorboard, every chipped tile. I chose this place. No one handed it to me. No one made me feel guilty for being there. I reconnected with a friend from college, Jamie, who ran a podcast about community stories and asked if I'd be willing to talk about my work at the center. I was nervous, but I did it. I told my story, not the family drama, just the part about working with kids, building programs, learning how to lead. The episode got more listens than any other they'd done that month. Someone from a local nonprofit heard it and offered me a paid consulting gig helping them build their own youth mentorship initiative. The gig turned into a side hustle. The side hustle turned into a LinkedIn profile. The LinkedIn profile turned into networking. And for the first time in my life, people were reaching out to me because they valued what I had to say, not because they needed me to clean up their messes. But even as things were climbing, the ghosts of my past lingered. My phone buzzed one night while I was prepping lesson plans for a summer camp. It was Jake. First time I'd heard from him in months. "Jake, hey, you around?" I stared at the message for a full minute, then typed a short reply. "Me? Yeah. 3 dots. Then nothing. Then finally, "Jake, they're selling the house." I didn't respond right away. Jake said they can't keep up. Too expensive. Too much upkeep. Not enough help. Help. Right. Jake, they're fighting a lot. I'm probably gonna move in with a friend for a while. Just thought you should know. I should have felt vindicated. Maybe I did, on some level. But mostly, I felt hollow. Then he sent one more text. "Jake, it's weird without you here." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because part of me still wanted to believe that sentence meant more than it did. That maybe, finally, he was starting to see what I had gone through. But I knew better. The next day, I got an email from my mom. A long one. She didn't apologize. Not directly. But she did say this. We didn't realize how much we depended on you until you left. I think we took you for granted. I know we don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope we haven't lost you completely." I didn't reply, not because I hated her, not because I was angry, but because I needed more than words. I needed time. I needed space. And more than anything, I needed to see who I was without them defining it for me. I went for a walk that evening, just around the block, nothing special. But the sun was setting, and the air was soft in that late spring way that makes everything feel temporary and important at the same time. I looked around at the neighborhood I was slowly learning to love. The little diner on the corner, the bookstore with the crooked sign, the laundromat with the neon light that always flickered like it was winking at me. And I realized something. I was okay. Not perfect. Not healed. But okay. I had climbed out of a place I didn't even realize I was drowning in. I had rebuilt my life from the ground up, piece by piece. I had chosen myself, and I was still choosing myself every day. And that was worth more than any car, any handshake, any forced smile at a graduation party I paid for but wasn't really invited to. But just when I thought the story was finally settling into peace, just when I thought the dust had cleared and I could breathe, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in slightly shaky ink. Inside, a legal notice. They were suing me. The envelope was thin, too light to feel threatening, too plain to signal danger. I nearly tossed it aside with the grocery ads and random credit card offers, but something about the handwriting stopped me. It wasn't neat. My mom's cursive had always been picture perfect, like it belonged on thank you cards. This was rough, uneven, like the person writing it wasn't used to holding a pen for long. I slid it open with my thumb, expecting maybe a passive-aggressive note or a long, rambling apology someone didn't have the courage to send by text. But no, it was a notice of small claims court. I stood there in my kitchen, holding the paper with fingers that had gone ice cold, scanning the words twice before I understood what they were saying. They were suing me. Specifically, my parents were suing me for abandonment of financial responsibilities, deliberate disruption of service contracts, and, for good measure, emotional distress due to sudden and prolonged absence. My breath caught halfway down my throat. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake, or a joke, but there it was, stamped and signed. My own parents had filed paperwork against me. It was almost funny. Almost. I sat down at my rickety kitchen table, the letter spread out like some absurd artifact from a twisted alternate timeline, and tried to piece together what they could possibly be thinking. The electric bills? I'd canceled those after moving out. The Wi-Fi? Same story. The lease? My name was never on it. They had no legal claim. And yet they'd bundled together a bunch of emotional grievances, dressed them up in legalese, and sent them off like a parting shot. That's when the nausea hit. Not from fear, but from disgust. This wasn't just about money or missed utility payments. This was about punishment, about control. They couldn't guilt me into coming back. They couldn't manipulate me through Jake. They couldn't tug on the nostalgia of we're still family anymore. So this was the Hail Mary. One last desperate attempt to drag me back into the pit. I could have reacted a lot of ways. I could have ranted, screamed into a pillow, driven straight to their house and banged on the door until they opened it, just so I could throw the letter in their faces. But I didn't do any of that. Instead, I sat very still. I let the fury settle like sediment in water. And I realized something that sent a slow smile creeping across my face. They just gave me exactly what I needed. See, until that moment, everything had been personal, emotional, a tangled web of guilt and resentment, hurt feelings and messy family ties. I hadn't fought back, not really, because I didn't want to stoop to their level. I told myself I was taking the high road, that I was above petty revenge. But this wasn't family anymore. This was business, and I was good at business. Over the next few days, I did what any responsible, wronged adult would do. I lawyered up. Not officially. I couldn't afford a full-blown attorney, but I did what I could. I reached out to a friend from the youth nonprofit who'd gone to law school and now worked at a legal aid clinic. He reviewed the paperwork with me over coffee one evening, flipping through it with the same expression you'd reserve for a particularly dumb internet conspiracy theory. They don't have a leg to stand on, he said, thumbing through the pages. None of this would hold in court. It's not even clear what they're asking for. There's no contract, no formal agreement, and certainly no damages they can prove. They're just mad you stopped paying for things you didn't owe in the first place. I nodded. So what do I do? He leaned back in his chair. You have two options. You can show up, present your case, and win, which you will. Or you can counterclaim. I blinked. Counterclaim. He smiled. For your emotional distress. For the unpaid reimbursements. For the way they've weaponized your role in the family. You'd need documentation, of course, but from what you've told me, you'd have a compelling case. Especially if you framed it as a pattern of exploitation. My mind raced. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't just reacting. I was planning. That night, I started gathering everything. Receipts, bank statements, emails, text messages, photos from the graduation party, where I was clearly doing setup and teardown while Jake took selfies with his car. Venmo screenshots of every loan that was never repaid. The invoice Dad handed me with my name written in smug, precise print. But that wasn't all. I started documenting my childhood. Not the vague stuff, they were mean, or they favored Jake, but specifics. Times when I'd paid for groceries while they were on vacation. Months I covered the water bill just until things stabilized. Birthdays I spent alone while they threw parties for Jake. The time Mom promised to help with my college books and never sent the money, leaving me scrambling to buy a used physics textbook 2 weeks into the semester. The memories poured out like water through a cracked dam. At first, it was exhausting, but then it became energizing, like I was reclaiming something, taking back the narrative, turning the emotional quicksand I'd been stuck in for years into solid, documented proof. I even made a spreadsheet, a detailed, color-coded spreadsheet. It had columns for the date, the amount of money I'd contributed, the context, whether it was repaid, and any attached evidence, screenshot, email, or physical receipt. By the end of the week, it was over 40 items long, thousands of dollars, dozens of hours, a whole adolescence, neatly quantified. But revenge isn't just about justice. It's about timing. And I had the perfect opportunity. Remember that podcast I did? The one where I talked about the youth center work? Well, turns out it had gotten some traction. Enough that a local radio station invited me to do a follow-up interview. The topic? Unsung local heroes. Kind of cheesy, but I didn't mind. This time, I talked a little more openly. I didn't name names, but I spoke about what it means to grow up in a home where love is conditional, where expectations are skewed, where being the good kid means being invisible. I talked about the pain of realizing your own family sees you as a tool, not a person. I talked about walking away and building something for yourself. It wasn't a sob story. It was a statement. And people listened. That week, the podcast episode jumped in downloads. I got 3 new consulting requests. Carla at the community center forwarded me an email from a donor who wanted to fund an expansion and asked if I'd be willing to help lead it. Meanwhile, back at the house, things were unraveling. Jake texted me again. This time, it wasn't about the bills. It was about the house sale. Apparently, Dad had miscalculated some zoning issue, and the buyers were threatening to back out. Money was tight. Mom was in one of her moods. Jake asked if we could talk sometime soon. Just us. I didn't answer. I was too busy putting together a packet for my counterclaim. It was 30 pages long. Labeled. Indexed. Tabbed. The cover sheet read, Counterclaim in response to case number 44391, Austin Mitchell versus Charles and Diane Mitchell. Inside was everything. And I mean everything. The utilities. The receipts. The graduation invoice. The text from Dad saying, "You're an adult now. You understand how this works." The voicemail from Mom asking for help again. The documentation showing I'd moved out and terminated all responsibilities legally. Even screenshots of the landlord confirming I'd ended my relationship with the property before any alleged disruptions. My friend from the legal clinic helped me format it all. He even coached me on how to deliver it. Calmly, professionally, no raised voices. I wasn't going to lose control. Not this time. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. But here's the kicker. A few days before the court date, I got another envelope. This one wasn't a legal notice. It was a handwritten letter from my dad. Inside, he said they wanted to withdraw the claim, that it had gotten out of hand, that they were just trying to get your attention, that they missed me, wanted to reconnect, and hoped I could come home for dinner just like old times. I didn't respond. Instead, I submitted my counterclaim anyway, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about setting a precedent. I was done being the one who folded, the one who forgave without acknowledgement. The one who cleaned up everyone's messes and got blamed when the room was still dirty. This wasn't a rebellion. It was a boundary, and once it was set, there was no going back. But what happened in the courtroom? Well, let's just say they weren't expecting what I walked in with. The courthouse smelled like old carpet and fluorescent lights. That weird, sterile scent of bureaucracy and budget cuts. I sat alone on a wooden bench outside courtroom 2B, my manila folder balanced neatly on my lap, fingers resting on the edge like I was holding a loaded weapon. In a way, I was. The door creaked open. Austin Mitchell, the clerk called. I stood, smoothed out my shirt, and walked inside. The room was small, not like what you see on TV. No grand jury box, no towering judge's bench. Just a few rows of chairs, a couple of desks, and a magistrate with reading glasses perched low on her nose. She looked up as I entered, nodding me toward one side. Across the room, I spotted my parents sitting stiffly behind the petitioner's table. My father was in his usual business casual, polo shirt tucked into khakis, arms crossed, jaw clenched like a man trying very hard not to say something he'd regret. My mother looked more composed. She wore a navy blue blouse and matching earrings, hair curled just right, the corners of her mouth tight with forced civility. Her eyes flicked toward me but didn't linger. I sat down, quiet, calm. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, the magistrate said, flipping through a file, you're bringing forth a claim regarding abandonment of financial responsibilities and alleged emotional distress. Is that correct? My father cleared his throat and leaned forward. Yes, Your Honor. Our son, Austin, was financially responsible for several services at our residence. He canceled them abruptly without notice, which caused significant hardship. We also believe his sudden departure caused undue emotional strain. The magistrate raised an eyebrow. Do you have documentation showing these agreements were legally binding or contractually understood? Dad hesitated. Well, no. But did he sign anything agreeing to these responsibilities? No, but he lived with us, and she nodded, holding up a hand. We'll come back to that. Mr. Mitchell, she turned to me. Do you have a response to these claims? I stood, opened the folder, and handed over a copy of my counterclaim. Yes, Your Honor. I have submitted a detailed packet of evidence refuting every claim. Additionally, I'm filing a counterclaim citing long-term financial exploitation, emotional manipulation, and attempts at legal harassment. My mother's face twitched. Dad's arms uncrossed slowly, like he'd just realized this wasn't going to go the way he thought. The magistrate flipped through the pages. Her brow furrowed. This is extensive. Yes, ma'am. I've included dates, financial records, and supporting evidence. To be clear, I do not seek punitive damages. I only seek reimbursement for money I spent on their behalf and an official dismissal of their claims. And then I sat back down. I didn't look at them. I didn't need to. The silence on their side of the room said everything. Over the next 30 minutes, I calmly explained the timeline. How I was never on the lease. How I paid for utilities at their request, but was never legally obligated to do so. How I'd sent funds multiple times for emergencies and temporary help, none of which were ever repaid. How they handed me an invoice after Jake's graduation party, despite knowing I had already contributed hundreds of dollars. And how they filed this suit not in pursuit of justice, but as a tactic to regain control over someone who finally refused to play along. The magistrate asked questions. I answered them. Clearly, directly. When it came time for my parents to respond, my dad's voice wavered. He's twisting things. We were a family. Families help each other. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. The magistrate spoke first. Mr. Mitchell, you brought your son to court under claims that have no legal merit and now appear rooted in emotional disappointment rather than factual wrongdoing. She turned to her monitor, typed for a moment, then looked back up. My ruling is as follows. The plaintiff's claim is dismissed in its entirety. The defendant's counterclaim is valid. I am awarding him full reimbursement in the amount of $3,241.75 to be paid within 60 days. This court considers the matter closed. The gavel came down with a dull thunk. And just like that, it was over. I stood up, thanked the magistrate, and walked out of the courtroom. My parents remained seated, stunned into silence. Dad's hands were clenched in his lap. Mom blinked slowly, like someone waking from a bad dream they thought was real. They didn't follow me out. I stepped into the sunlight, and took the deepest breath I'd had in months, maybe years. The kind that goes all the way down into your chest and lifts something you didn't know was there. I expected to feel triumph, vengeance, the satisfaction of watching them lose. But instead, I felt free. Not the kind of freedom that comes from running away, but the kind that comes from choosing yourself and knowing you're not going to turn back. The check arrived 3 weeks later. No note, no apology, just a cold envelope with my name on it and a signature at the bottom of a cashier's check from my parents' joint account. I deposited it. I used some of it to fix my car, paid off a credit card, and took the rest to buy a brand new mattress. The real kind, memory foam, pillow top, the works. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized it was the first time in years I'd made a purchase for myself without guilt. No strings, no expectations, just peace. Jake reached out once more after that. Jay, I heard what happened. They're pretty upset. Me, so was I. For years. He didn't reply. He didn't have to. He was still in it, still tangled up in their web. Maybe he'd figure it out one day. Maybe not. I wasn't waiting around to find out. 6 months later, I was promoted to program director at the youth center. I'd started a mentorship initiative for teens aging out of foster care, using the same skills I'd developed surviving my own family. It was thriving. I was thriving. I moved into a better apartment, more space, real furniture, even a little balcony where I kept a tomato plant I somehow hadn't killed yet. I didn't post about the court case. I didn't gossip. I didn't throw it in anyone's face. But word got around. My mom tried calling once, Christmas Eve, left a voicemail that started with a shaky, "Hi honey," and ended with, "Just think about coming by. We miss you." I deleted it. Because here's what they never understood. I didn't want revenge. I wanted respect. I wanted acknowledgement. And when I stopped hoping for it, I got something better, self-worth. The truth is, I wasn't the problem. I was the solution they took for granted. The backbone they leaned on until it finally gave out. And now? Now they were learning what life looked like without it. Without me. I don't know if they'll ever get it. Maybe they'll rewrite the story in their heads. Tell themselves I turned cold, that I overreacted, that I abandoned them. That's fine. Let them. Because I know the truth. And now, thanks to them, so does the court. So does the community. And most importantly, so do I. I'm not their handyman. I'm not their doormat. I'm not their scapegoat, or ATM, or silent fixer. And I don't owe them anything anymore.
18. Number 18. We have raffles every 15 minutes, guys. I think it's 15 minutes or 30 minutes. I can't remember. It's one of them. Did you just go back to bed? Did you just go back to bed after eating? Yeah. Hello. Are you done? Yeah. Was it good? Yeah. Okay. I'm rich because of the $250,000. Oh yeah, I gave that to you, huh? Oh crap. Right. Wait, you didn't even gamble it?